everyone, and welcome to another episode of Business and Beyond's Feature Friday. I am Tanya Bartolini, and I have a wonderful guest today. His name is Steve Fales, and Steve is a husband and father, an entrepreneur who founded an advertising agency in 1989, grew it substantially, and sold it in 2020. He is also an author, 5 books so far, and a public speaker. He is an endurance athlete, as you will see behind him. He has done 16 full marathons, multiple triathlons, and shorter road races. He's a tournament chess player, a listener, a communicator, a mentor for both business and personal, and a wonderful friend. He is also very humble with all of these accomplishments, and I am very excited to have him here today. Thank you for joining us, Steve.
Thank you, Tanya. I feel like I know you. I am here in South Florida, as you are, as you know, and I've seen your name for many years. You're very involved in all types of networking, and your name pops up here and there often. So I'm thankful to be with you in this podcast venture that you've launched. So nice to
Thank
see
you.
you.
You too. And so I know you sold your company back in 2020, the
Yes.
advertising agency, but can you give us a 90-second overview of your business, what you do or what
Sure.
you did, and how you got into it?
Sure. Well, I was very fortunate to be working for Publix when I was in high school. And, just in the store, just bagging groceries, putting cans on the shelf. But Publix, at that time at least, I'm not sure what the policies are today, but promoted from within. And I was very interested in advertising. I had a friend who was in advertising, and I would go watch him work now and then. And boy, it looked like he was having fun. So I applied for a job at the Publix advertising department because, as I said, they promoted from within. And lo and behold, by some miracle, I got the job. And I was there for several years. Perhaps a strong argument could be made I should have stayed, but I left that. I took a little detour for a while, but came back to advertising, worked for a couple companies in South Florida, and then started my own agency. So that was it. I was just very interested. I loved the creative side. I loved writing and solving media problems and problems for clients and just coming up with ideas. So that's how I got into it. Yeah, just started by myself. Never didn't know what would happen, but very fortunate to gain some great clients and be able to build a company and scale a company and wound up doing pretty well after a while. It took a while to get some traction, but yeah, it worked out well in the long run.
And you just said something really profound. It took a while, but it worked out
Oh,
well, right?
yeah.
So, as you know, I am launching this podcast. I have this podcast to help other business owners understand that they're not
Hmm.
alone, right? Every business owners has obstacles. Every business owners goes through certain things that they might not have anticipated or wanted. And so
Yeah.
what are some of, if you don't mind sharing, what are some of these obstacles or issues that you faced, especially early on, and
Yeah.
how did you overcome them? How did you continue for that while until it became successful in your eyes?
Sure thing. Well, first of all, I don't mind you asking me anything. I'm very happy to share whatever I can to help anyone. And I will say that different people have different philosophies of business and of how to run and start a business and grow a business. My philosophy was very conservative. I'm not saying it's the best philosophy. I've seen other companies which took greater risks and grew exponentially compared to what I did. But the way I did it, I bootstrapped everything. I really avoided debt like the plague. So I bootstrapped. I grew very slowly. I always believed as I had a wonderful mentor, and his advice to me was that revenues come before expenses. I know some people do it the other way, and God bless them, and sometimes it works out. But I did not take on debt, and so I grew very, very slowly. It was hard. You asked obstacles. I did not go out and buy nice things. I bought secondhand furniture. My first credenza was two drawer file cabinets with a piece of wood on the top of them. And of course, years later, I was able to have custom furniture built, but that was 20 years later. So yeah, that's how I did it, very slowly. When I needed an employee, I waited until I was working more than I could stand before I hired someone, and that's kind of how things went. And eventually, I had 26 employees, so it did grow. I will also say, you mentioned the marathons. My business growth, my business philosophy was much similar to the way I run marathons. I'm not the fastest guy. In fact, I'm mid pack at best, but I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And after several hours, I crossed the finish line, hopefully. And that's how I did it in business. I never had a magic formula, a secret bullet. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. The basics, answering your emails, returning your phone calls, doing what you said you were going to do, exceeding expectations when you can. And people use that phrase all the time. We exceed expectations, but I tried to quantify that. So if I told you we would have something done on Thursday, I tried to have it done on Wednesday. If you ordered 10,000 brochures for me, I tried to give you 11,000. So those types of things that I did intentionally. So that was it. Just plotting, plotting. That's how I overcame those adversities.
Thank you for sharing that, because I have found a lot of people think that they have to go from 0 to 60 in,
Yeah.
30 seconds or 10 seconds. And it's not necessarily what's best for them or what their goal is. So I love that you shared,
Yeah.
you didn't take on debt. That was not the structure that you wanted. You did it your way. You did it slowly and you succeeded. And you still were able to get the custom built furniture. You built a
Eventually.
right. But that's, I think one of the things I always like to inspire people with is that it's your life, it's your business, right? It's
Yeah.
what's going to work for you, not necessarily what worked for someone else. And
Right.
right, as you said,
Yeah.
there's so many different ways of doing it. But if you
Yeah.
align with your goals and your personality, then it's going to be a much bigger struggle and it's more likely to fail. Correct?
I agree. That's right. And if your next guest or the next person someone talks to says the way to grow is to take on debt and expand rapidly, do all these things, God bless them if it works for them. I have no quarrel with that. That's just not my personality. Yeah.
That and so yes, I love there are so many different ways of doing something and still getting it right.
Yeah.
So what do you see is the biggest problem in your industry? And on the second end of it is how did you solve it in your company?
Yeah. Well, you asked about my industry, which was advertising and marketing. I think, but I also want to possibly talk about business in general. But I'll start with advertising and marketing. The way I approached it was more of a scientific approach. As people think about advertising being this very creative thing, and it is. There's a lot of fun in that part of it. But I would approach it first from a scientific, more logical perspective of trying to analyze what the problem is that the client is trying to solve and what the hot buttons are of their prospects. So thinking it through from a left brain perspective before coming up with the big creative idea. I know that there's a school of thought in advertising that it starts with the big idea. And again, if that works for someone, that's fine. But that's not how I did it. So I would meet a client and it probably wouldn't be flashy in the least, but I would listen. I would take note of their pain points and even more importantly, their prospects' pain points. And then I might not have anything to say in that meeting, but I'm more the type of person who gets inspired by just hard work. So I would come back, I would think it through, I would talk to people and try to come up with the idea that way. So in my case, I think to answer your question, the big problem of advertising and marketing industry is trying to figure out that balance between the big idea and solving the problem. Because some big ideas are really, really cool. Like that's a cool idea, but it doesn't work. You know, it's fun. I mean, think about TV commercials, right? Sometimes you say, "Oh, that was a really funny TV commercial. That was a really great commercial." And then I ask you, "What company was it for?" And people say, "Oh, I don't know. I just know it was funny, right?" So we don't want to be boring, but we have to be able to promote the client, the company, as well as be creative. So that's it. If you don't mind, I'll go into a little bit about what I see as the biggest problem in business in general, in any business, and how to overcome that. And I always felt was people. You know that you can start most any business with a credit card, right? So I can buy desks, I can buy computers, I can buy supplies, I can even rent an office probably with a credit card. But what makes this business different and better than this business are the people inside that business. So I have to say it was absolutely brutal about hiring. I had various assessments and things I used to help me select the right people. And very thankfully, I had great people who stayed around for a long time. They're my friends still today, 5 years after selling the company. And I believe that they had a good time working for my company. And I took on partners eventually who I'm still friends with. And so, yeah, I would say to anyone who's working on building a business that selecting and hiring the right people is got to be your top priority as you move forward.
That's, I think to expand on that, people are the most important part of the business, period, whether it's your employees or your customers.
Very good. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Right. And yes, it's all about building the relationships that are going to work, right?
Hmm.
And it starts from the top. I always say hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't want to mention that fire part, but but I did. Yeah, I wasn't afraid to help someone find a new future outside my company if that was required. Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't happen too often because, as you said, high or slow. So when you do that, you have a better chance, but nobody bats 1,000, right? So yeah,
Yeah, and just because someone doesn't work out doesn't make them a bad person, doesn't make you a bad
absolutely.
person. Right. What I love what you just said was that you helped them find their future. So it wasn't just, oh, you're fired, go, we're done. It's, hey,
Yeah,
this is not working out. What can we do to get you in a better position somewhere else?
yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what keeps that humanity in the relationships and the business, what keeps
Yeah,
you going and having better employees, more loyalty, better clients, because you care about the people as people, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
That's
My
um
clients especially appreciate that, right? when you care about them as people, right? Relationship first. Yeah, for sure.
And so my next question, which you've already answered, is what makes you unique in the way you help others? And
Mm,
a big part of that from hearing you speak is the fact that you care about the people as people. You're still friends with everybody who used to work for you because you made a culture that was conducive to
yeah.
relationships.
Hmm.
So is there something else that's unique about you that you would like to share with the
Mm.
audience?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Tanya, when people ask me a question, I try to capture the first thing that pops into my mind. So I would say this. I would say the first thing that pops into my mind is leadership style. And I have to qualify that by saying that my leadership style evolved. And so in the beginning of my business career as a leader, because, well, let's say this. I started an advertising agency because I felt that I was good at advertising. I felt that I knew how to, as I mentioned, I had a unique ability to learn the client's problems and to apply some creativity to that and help them build their business or get more leads or expand in some way. I didn't know any, so that's why I started the agency. I didn't know anything about starting an agency. I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know about leadership and management and all the other things that come along with running a business. So those things I learned along the way. And when it comes to leadership style, I must make a confession that I was the self-employed guy who didn't like my boss. I I was a bit of a micromanager, and if anyone's listening to this who worked for me in those early years, they're gonna say amen to that. And I had to learn, and I can remember almost specifically to the day that I said, it needs to no longer be about what I do myself. It needs to be about empowering other people to do those things. That I realized that delegation did not mean here, take my work and do it and come back to me. Delegation meant I'm giving this to you. This is now yours. That I stopped answering the questions and instead I would ask the questions. These are all things I learned, but not on day one, believe me. So later on, when people would come to me and say, Steve, we have this issue. What do you think we should do? In the early days, I was right there to answer. Oh, well, let's do this. Go do. But in the later days, I would say, well, what do you think we should do? And and we would talk about it. So that's what I would say. I'm not sure if that's unique about me, but it is definitely something I can say about myself that I had to learn along the way. And there's no way. I mean, 26 employees is not General Motors. It's not a huge company, but there's no way I could have built a company to that size by still trying to micromanage everything myself. Yeah.
And one thing you said that I really want to bring to the forefront is that you started because you were good at marketing. And so you did not know about how to build an agency or
Yeah.
leadership. And I find most people who start businesses start it because they're really good at what they do. And most of the time, they don't know anything about building a business. They don't know anything
Yeah.
about advertising or how to get clients. All they know is that they're good at this one thing that they're doing. Right.
Right.
And it boggles my mind when I hear people say, well, I opened it and I thought it was just going to work without
Ooh.
having other skills. And I love that
Yeah.
you took the time and especially early on recognize that you needed to learn skills. You needed to learn how to run a business. You needed to learn how to lead people. You needed to learn how to delegate properly and ask questions. And you became open to learning from your employees. So you became open to
Mm-hmm.
learning from other people, which is unique and very commendable. And I believe that's what makes a good business,
Mm-hmm.
right? Two heads are better than one,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So I wanted to say, what is the biggest failure or challenge that you have faced in your life? And how did that shape the way that you did business?
Ooh, biggest failure or challenge. This may sound like it's coming out of left field to answer the question, but again, I just want to capture what's in my head at first. And that is the biggest challenge I had in the 31 years of business was when we got a big spurt of growth. We were handling marketing for a few offices, a few territories of a national company. And that company decided to change their advertising marketing model and promote one agency for the whole country. And we entered the pitch and won. So I got a call one day from the marketing person who said, "Are you having a good day?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You want to have a better one?" I said, "Okay." She said, "You won." So all of a sudden, we went from handling a few territories to handling 40 territories.
Wow.
And I had to, of course, it's like the old commercials said, never let them see you sweat. I didn't want the client to know that I was probably going to hang up the phone and go run to the bathroom. But so I had to staff up. I had to get more space, more office space, everything had to gear up. Plus, I had to go introduce myself to 40 territory offices around the country. And so I had to do a road trip. I was hitting 2 cities a week, talking about my company, introducing myself because we had just been appointed by corporate as the what they call preferred agency partner. So that was a big challenge. That was a big challenge. Not the type of challenge like losing a lot of business, although I've had those challenges as well. But yeah, I think sometimes getting a big influx at once can be challenging. Plus, as I said, I avoided debt like the plague, so cash flow became a little tight for a while because we were all of a sudden we went from buying this much media to buying this much media, etc. So yeah, that was challenging. How did I overcome it? I'll tell you, to this day, one of the greatest miracles of my life was I placed one ad on Indeed and hired 2 stellar employees. That never happened. They just came out of nowhere. It was a miracle of God. I can't say it any other way. But I had 2 great employees who came along from that as account executives because I needed account executives, and those are really tough people to find. People with the right culture, as you said, of caring about the client and not just being sales types. So that helped overcome it. And I'm not proud of this, but the other thing I did to overcome it was I just poured hours into work. I just worked nonstop, 4 in the morning till 8, 9 o'clock at night for days. But eventually, things settled in. I got the road show out of the way. Everybody in the country knew me, knew my business. The new people started to work out, and so it leveled out after a while. But that was when you asked me the question, that was the first thing that popped in my head was that big growth spurt. Yeah.
That's but Thank you for that, because most people do not realize that having a growth part is a challenge or can be an
Yeah.
obstacle. And I have seen businesses implode from
Hmm.
having too much growth at one time
Yeah,
and not being ready for it and not
absolutely.
properly working with it, right? And so I love that you brought that up, because it's something that people don't think about as an obstacle or a
Mm.
challenge, and it really is. um
Yeah.
Other thing you brought up was that you went, even though you were appointed, they were already your client, you still went on this road trip,
Mm.
worked really hard, and introduced yourself to everybody,
Yeah.
when you could have just gotten the job anyways, right? You would have gotten the
Yeah,
work anyway.
probably so. Yeah, probably
So
so.
that to me shows that relationships and having that human connection and caring about knowing the people that you're working with really does make a big difference. And it's worth taking the time to do, rather than just saying, oh, wait, I have too much to do now, I can't go and say hi, let
Mm.
me concentrate on this other back end stuff, right?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so I think those
Hmm.
are great lessons for people to hear and understand. And there was one more point that you had said that got me. I should have probably wrote that down. Um,
It'll probably come up again.
yes, it probably will. Um, so if you had one thing to give someone as advice who, oh, this is it. Okay. Before this question.
Okay.
So
All right.
balance, right?
Oh, balance.
Balance. You said that you're not proud of it, but you had to work really hard for a little while, and
Yeah.
then it kind of leveled out, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that to me is balance,
Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
right? Most people think, oh, it has to be balanced every day, or it has to be balanced.
Right.
And I don't think that's true. There's no such thing
Yeah.
as an everyday balance.
Exactly. Yeah. I do a fair amount of mentoring these days, and I often tell people to think about seasons. Think about the world seasons, and our lives are about seasons as well. And sometimes we have a new baby in the house, and we have a season there of maybe working a bit less or not spending our evenings catching up on email. Sometimes we have a big project, the budget's due, the whatever, the client gives us something huge. That's another season. And I always tell people not to feel ashamed when they have to be in a season. But I also tell people a key, unlike nature, is that we have to know when the seasons change. And it's so easy to get in that vortex where you get sucked into a particular season and you don't recognize when it's able to change. So, yeah, I think what you said is perfect, that we need to look at balance as a more overall type of thing throughout life, throughout pieces of our lives. Yeah, very good.
Yes, thank you. So these have been really amazing nuggets today that you
Mm,
have given me and my audience. And
well, good.
so how can people, are you still mentoring? Can people contact you?
Sure.
So how can they do
Yeah.
that?
Okay. Well, my email address is just my name, Steve Fales, Stevef, like Frank, Ales at Gmail. And I have a website, which is just my name, stevefales.com. On there, I have links to all my books that I've written, and again, a forum to contact me. And I do enjoy speaking with people. I'm all about people's stories. Everybody has a story. I say that often, and I'm not soliciting people for any kind of engagement. I just like to hear their stories, and we can chat by email, we can chat by Zoom, and if something more comes of that, that's fine. But yeah, I'm at a point. I hope you don't mind, but you started asking me about advice, and I would say that one of the things that was amazing to me is that I had a couple of really tremendous mentors along the way, amazing people. And I've been very fortunate in business and other areas. And so if I can give back a little bit of that, I'm very happy to. So nobody needs to be afraid to contact me and think that I'm going to try to take advantage and sell them or whatever. But as I said, if it goes, well, whatever. But I'm just very happy to speak with people. So yes, my email address, my website is just my name. So that's it.
And all of that information will be in the comments. So don't worry if you missed them. And they will be at the end of the video as well. And before I let you go, you have 5 books that you have published. Can you just give us a little taste of
Sure.
what are they? What are they about?
Yeah. 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 So the first book, so when I had my company, I wrote an email every Tuesday that was just kind of motivational business development, spiritual development, personal development. And I called it very simply the Tuesday morning email. So over the years, I had hundreds of these. I compiled 156 of them, which is 3 years worth, 3 times 52. And I call it 3 years of Tuesday mornings. So it's just little short articles, business development, personal development, spiritual development, various thoughts. So that's the first book. And then I wrote a book called Companality. It's about culture. The concept is that a person has a personality and a company has a companality. And in my business, I did a lot of consulting on companality with these territories that I mentioned, these 40 territories. I would go around to them and speak on various topics, and that was one of my presentations was called Companality: Developing Intentional Organizational Culture. And then I wrote a book about friendship. It's called Loving Your Neighbor, a Practical Guide. And it's just about how to be a good friend, how to listen and ask questions, how to get, I mentioned everybody has a story, how to get to people's story, how to listen to their story, how to get excited about their story, how to connect with emotion, that type of thing. So, and because that book has been picked up by some study groups, I created a study guide for that. So that's book 4. And then my 5th book is actually a spiritual devotional. It's just simple articles. It doesn't come, it's not proselytizing any particular religion. And it's called Other Sheep because Jesus, when he was speaking to a group of religious people, said, I have other sheep who are not from this fold. So I call this Other Sheep because it's much broader. So those are the 5 books. But before I let you go, I'm sorry. I mentioned how I had great mentors, and I think I want to commend you for what you're doing with this podcast because not everyone has access to a mentor like I did, and you're providing a lot of great advice and mentorship through the podcast. So good for you. That's commendable of what you're doing.
Thank you. I wish I could do it myself, but I know what I don't know. And so I really appreciate people like you coming on and giving some of your experience and some of your wisdom to help me and other business owners. And I just want to say, I love how your books are so holistic because they talk about every aspect of a human being, right? You have the spiritual, you have the business, you have the emotion. And I love that it's all encompassing because we forget sometimes that businesses are made of people and
Mm-hmm.
people are multifaceted.
Absolutely.
right? And everything is connected. And so once we start looking at a business as people and how do we treat them and how do we build those relationships and how do we build a culture that aligns with us and that works for us, that's when all of that magic happens and things start
Yeah.
becoming better. And you probably manifested those 2 employees that you needed at that time because of your intention, because of how you built
Yeah.
everything. It was easy for them to come into that fold. At least that's my
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I should have mentioned when you mentioned about building culture that the book Companality, it's not a rah-rah book about how a company should have culture. There are books like that out there, and those are fine. My book is more of a workshop book. It talks about the how-tos. It's called Developing Intentional Organizational Culture. So it has exercises in there. One I call the Companality Continuum, the Companality Vision. These are exercises to help leaders define what they want in a culture because outside the parameters of a profession, for example, your profession as an attorney has certain parameters as far as dress and even office types and vocabulary and things. But outside those parameters, there's still some latitude, right? So what's better, cubicles or closed offices? There's no better. What's better? Remote work, even now. So I think leaders should first define the culture they want and then build toward it. And that's what the book does. It has exercises and workshop ideas. And that's what I did when I would go out to present on culture. I would help people define before they build. I always say strategy before tactics. And that's how the book works. Yeah.
That I really love that because you can find all kinds of information on the internet. I mean, anything anyone has thought of is probably there, but there's not a lot of how to, right?
Yeah.
It's all, oh, do this and do that. Okay, how does that help me?
Yeah. Yeah. So breaking it down into steps is very important.
Yeah, so I recommend this book to everybody who is listening, because it is difficult to find that how to. It is difficult to get the information and then figure out how do I implement it. I
Yeah.
think that's the toughest part because getting the information is easy. It's how do you implement it? How do you make it work for you and your business? And I love that
Right.
you have a how-to book on developing the culture because it is so essential to business. Any last words for our audience?
Hmm. Well, again, just grabbing what comes into my head that we all have something to offer others. And Tanya, you said a few minutes ago that you know what you don't know and you wish you could be a mentor. And I have to just sort of push back on that. You are a mentor. As I said initially, I've seen your name come up and your little blurbs and things come up probably for years now as I peruse LinkedIn and I'm slightly connected to the South Florida business community. So you're absolutely a mentor. So that's what I would say to everyone out there is that find what resonates with you and find someone who needs that and give that to them because we learn more when we teach, by the way. So that's a good thing for us. It comes back to us, but it kind of just keeps the cycle of good things happening. So yeah, that's my big advice.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for being here. And again, Steve's information will be at the end of the video and down in the comments if you need to get a hold of him. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.